In today's video, we're going to talk about the final rule in the Book of Etiquette. It's one that we all know, but probably don't follow very often, if at all. So make sure you watch until the end, because I'm going to tell you what it is. And while you're at it, if you are new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get notified each time I upload a new video. And if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button so I know you like this topic. Now, let's get into today's video. If you've been around long enough or you read enough books, then you probably know the movie Forrest Gump. In the movie, the main character, Forrest, is waiting for his bus to come pick him up after school one day, and he sits on a nearby tree stump. As he's sitting there, a girl named Jenny approaches him. She looks at him for a second and then runs away. Later, Forrest finds out that she had been trying to tell him something by writing in a book and leaving it on that tree stump. Forrest was too slow to realize what was happening, though, and he never figured out what Jenny was trying to tell him. But that's not important right now. What I want you to remember from this story is that Jenny ran away from Forrest when she saw him. Now, this isn't an etiquette lesson, but in the 1940s, women were taught that if a boy or man was sitting on a tree stump and they ran up behind him and touched him on the shoulder, he would jump off the stump with fright, and then the girl could run away laughing. This was considered a fun little prank to play on the boys, but there's an actual etiquette rule rooted in similar ideas, and we're going to look at that today. The final rule in the Book of Etiquette is don't answer if it rings 3 times. Let me explain. Before caller ID and even before most people had telephones in their homes, there were no do not call lists, and telemarketers called all the time. They would call and ask to speak to the head of the household. And if they were lucky, they would get someone who actually made the decisions about what products and services the family used. But many times they would just get a teenager or a young child who would then yell for mom or dad to come to the phone. There were also other kinds of calls that would come through during the day. Sometimes these were important, such as a call from the police or the hospital. Other times these calls were less important, such as a neighbor looking to borrow a cup of sugar or a friend asking you to go shopping with them later that week. Most people had an unlisted number, so these kinds of calls weren't a regular occurrence. But when they did happen, it was understood that whoever answered the phone would screen the call and determine who needed to take the call. For instance, if the call was an emergency, then whoever picked up the phone would stay on the line and make sure help was on the way. Or if it was a friend wanting to chat, then the person answering the phone would say something like, "She'll be right with you," or "He's not available right now," and then put the caller on hold. Then they would go find the person who needed to talk on the phone and tell them it was a call for them. So how does this work with the rule of 3 rings? Well, back then, phones didn't have the feature to let you know when you had a call waiting. That meant if the phone rang once and you answered it, then the person calling knew you got the message. If the phone rang 2 times and you still hadn't answered, then the caller would hang up and try again another time. If the phone rang 3 times and you still hadn't answered, then the caller assumed you weren't going to answer and they hung up. The rule was that whoever answered the phone would let the call go to voicemail or let it ring 3 times. If they were uninterested in talking to the person who was calling, this allowed people to ignore calls from telemarketers, solicitors, and other people who called for non-urgent reasons. And if the phone rang more than 3 times, then the person answering the phone would check to see if there was a call waiting. If there was, then they would let the first caller go to voicemail and then answer the second call. This might seem like a silly rule to follow these days, but back then it was the best way to deal with nuisance calls without having caller ID or a do not call list. These days, we typically ignore calls from numbers we don't recognize, especially if they're not in our contact list. There are a few exceptions to this rule. For example, if your phone is ringing and you see an S, an unknown number, but an S coming from your state and area code, then you might want to pick up, because it could be someone you know who is trying to reach you. On the other hand, if it has a number you recognize, but it is coming from an area code you do aren't recognized, then you should definitely pick up, because it could be someone important trying to reach you. However, If you see it S, an unknown number, and it S, not in your contact list, and it S coming from an area code you won't recognize, then you can safely ignore the call. But back in the day, that wasn't an option. If you wanted to ignore a call, you had to let it ring 3 times. And if it wasn't an emergency, then you didn't need to answer the phone. I hope that cleared up any confusion about the whole 3 rings thing. I know some of you may have been confused about that growing up. You may have heard the saying, don't answer if it rings 3 times, but you never really knew why. Hopefully now you understand where that rule came from and why it was important to follow back in the day. These days, most of us have caller ID, so we don't really need to follow this rule anymore. But there are still a few of us who do. You want to have caller ID, or we may not want to use it for certain calls. And for those of us, the 3 rings rule is still a good one to follow. So what will you do now that you know this? Will you share this video with others so they can learn the history behind the 3 rings rule? Or maybe you will call an old friend who has caller ID and let their phone ring 3 times. Maybe you'll call an old friend who doesn't have caller ID and let the conversation begin. Whatever you decide to do, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, go ahead and hit that like button so I know you liked it. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button so you get notified each time I upload a new video. Also, be sure to visit our website. We have a blog there that you can read for free each day. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.